change from before is that she's not the charismatic figure who will inspire her following to walk through fire to support her the way they did for Chen Shui-bian. Two more things about the election outcome. The DPP just totally dominated this election in cyberspace, and the opposition still has to figure out, how to catch up in terms of the use of social media. And then there was an event, Kharis could explain it better than I can, with this girl band singer, Chou Tzu-yu, who was, on a TV show, I think, was it in Korea? And she was, she waved the Taiwan flag, and then on TV, and then, by the way, the flag of the Republic of China, Taiwan, not some kind of pro-independence flag. That's a very important thing I want to return to. And she was made to apologize tearfully, and this was, this kind of stirred the passions of a lot of people in Taiwan who felt we're not going to be pushed around like this. And
it was on the day of the election, so people were going to the polling places, and on every television network across the island, they showed her apology over again, all day.
And it's possible to speculate that without that, turnout might have been 1 or 2 percentage points lower. And that most of the people who were voting in response to that were pro-DPP. I personally think that one reason the turnout was so low is that everybody knew. I mean, we were at KMT headquarters the day before. I have never met a more depressed leader of the party than the Secretary General of the KMT on the day before the election. I mean, it was just obvious there was going to be a landslide against the KMT. And so I have a hunch that some DPP voters might not have voted because they knew that she was going to win in a landslide, and obviously some KMT voters were discouraged and didn't vote. Now looking ahead, first of all, let me note several governability challenges that I'm worried about. One is that we are now in a serious, I'd say almost or potentially political crisis in what is, I think, going forward, an unacceptably long political interregnum between the presidential election on January 16th and the presidential inauguration, I believe, on May 20th. 4 months. And to make it worse, the legislature is taking its office, the new legislature, which will now be a DPP legislature, February 1st. Okay. I thought it might have been this week. So next Monday. So we're going to have 3.5 months with the legislature controlled by the opposition and a not only lame duck, but totally finished president, kind of limping along. Now, in tribute to Ma Ying-jeou, who I really do believe people will look back on as as a decent man, who tried to rise above some of the partisan poison in the country. He has already offered to the president-elect to appoint a DPP prime minister, so that the country could be governed in a viable way. And she, I don't think, wants to do that because she figures, well, then, I'm not president yet, but you've already got a DPP government, and what can they do without the DPP president in place? And this whole situation should not be repeated again. And so I think this is going to make for an extremely difficult 3.5 months ahead. There is now a nearly complete vacuum of political authority in Taiwan. The premier is resigned, the cabinet is resigned, and it's a question about who's going to be running the country. Secondly, there needs to be reform of the functioning of the Li Fa Yuan, the Parliament. Kharis has studied this at great length. One of the reasons why the entire cabinet resigned, I think, is because they were looking at the prospect of 3.5 months where they'd be spending all their time, day after day, in what's called parliamentary interpellations, being grilled by the members of the parliament about everything imaginable just to kind of score points. And this drives to the deeper issue of a parliament that has become much too like the American Congress, which is to say, like Frank's term, vetocracy, where every member, can kind of block something or puff him or herself out as a grand inquisitor of an executive office holder. And this just doesn't make for good government.
Don't have Ted Cruz yet.
Not yet.
Well, they've got some people who may be obstructionists in a different way. Now, I think that the DPP has avoided a more serious problem that would have resulted if it had not won an absolute majority in Parliament. I was incredibly relieved that the DPP won an absolute majority of Parliament rather than having to rely on the New Power Party and possibly the Green Party and so on. And the reason why is because obviously if she didn't have her own parliamentary majority, she would be pulled further to the left toward more confrontational stances across the strait than I believe she would think is prudent, maybe toward more left and polarizing positions generally. Now she has the ability to govern more on her own terms. But looking forward, there is a serious prospect of constitutional reform. There's a strong desire to lower the voting age, for example, from 20 to 18 years old. And people are talking about reform of the Parliament, the system for electing Parliament. Parliament used to be 225 members, and in an act of vengeance against the political class, public pressure induced the politicians to cut it in half to 113 members. Before it was increased to 225 members, I think it had been 165, something like that, 160. And so some people are thinking, I've been advocating this for several years now, that the Parliament be increased back to 160 members, or something like that. You could actually do it very easily. Reopening, I mean, we know in the United States what we go through with congressional redistricting. I don't think there's any appetite for that, for redrawing the district boundaries in Taiwan. But if you add the 73 seats to the 6 Aboriginal seats, that's 79. So you could increase the PR list seats up from 34 to 79. That would be 45 more seats. And you'd probably have a better quality parliament and one that behaved more like maybe a traditional parliamentary body than the United States Senate with its vanity prerogatives for each member. The problem is that the DPP has committed itself to lower the electoral threshold from 5% to 3%. In order to appeal to a lot of these voters whose fascination was captured with the New Power Party and some of the other social democratic, green, and other kind of emergent popular parties. I think this would be a calamitously bad move for Taiwan, because Taiwan has become, whether you, even if this is not what you would deduce from a literal reading of its constitution, Taiwan has become, in fact, a presidential system. And when you merge a presidential system to a multi-party parliament, it is generally bad news